Moments ago, President Biden held a press conference in the Rose Garden with visiting Prime Minister of Australia. And he made a number of just common points he did based on their discussions and some of the things that they've agreed to. But after the press conference was over, he was asked two questions, two pretty important questions that have a lot of ramifications for American national security interests related to the war going on between Israel and Hamas. The first one he asked was this.
We have had troops in the region since 9/11 to go after ISIS and prevent its reemergence in both, anyway, in the region, having nothing to do with Israel at all. My warning to the Ayatollah was that if they continue to move against those troops, we will respond, and he should be prepared. It has nothing to do with Israel.
No, it has nothing to do with Israel. It has everything to do with American national security interests. Now, first of all, that question was asked in the backdrop of the fact that the Washington Post and others are reporting that in the past 48 hours, there have been more than a dozen attacks on American troops in the areas. 24 Americans have been wounded. Again, thank God none of them have been killed. But the question is, what about them? And Biden didn't even answer the question. He didn't say anything about what about them, only that, well, they've been there since 9/11. Okay, they haven't been in Syria since 9/11. That's the first point. And they haven't even been in Iraq all the time since 9/11. There was a 3-year period where they had been withdrawn. But they are there now. And I had been writing for a long time, specifically in the publication 1945, 2 years ago in July, I wrote that those troops there are doing nothing for American national security. All they're doing is basically being a point of vulnerability, that if anything were to happen, they could become targets from a lot of these nefarious groups that operate in the region or even Iran. Now that's playing out. So again, let me reiterate, our troops are on the ground and vulnerable in Iraq and in Syria, and they are providing no service to our country. They are not keeping us safe. And this fiction that they're trying to eradicate ISIS is nothing but a fig leaf. They are not trying to eradicate ISIS. They may do targeted strikes here and there, but it's like trying to drain a swimming pool with an eyedropper on a rainy day. It's not going to make any difference at all. So that's more of a fig leaf than anything else. The bigger question is, why do we leave them out there and so that they continue to be vulnerable? What is the purpose that we have them out there? That's what we need to hear from the president. What are those troops doing there now? Don't care how long they've been there. Don't care what they were originally sent there for. What are they doing now? And look, to say we're going to keep them safe, which the Secretary of Defense said earlier today, that we're going to send more assets into the region. We're going to send some air defense capabilities. The issue is not, hey, let's give some more capacity so these guys who are just sitting in the middle of the desert doing nothing for America, at least they can be safe. No, get them out. Don't just say, here's more capacity to defend you, because no air defense is foolproof. We've seen that every day in the Russia-Ukraine war. It's not foolproof. You see the Iron Dome, one of the best in the world, is not foolproof in Israel. There still was a lot of casualties in that. So don't just send more air defense, get the troops out. But President Biden didn't answer that, didn't even address it. So, of course, what that means is there's going to be no action and those troops are going to sit there. God help us all if, because of that inaction, some of our troops are subsequently killed. Now, the second issue that was brought up, I won't even speak for it. The reporter asked a question. We've got it right here.
Israeli forces have killed over 6,000 Palestinians, including 2,700 children. You've previously asked Netanyahu to minimize civilian casualties. Do these numbers say to you that he is ignoring that message?
What they say to me is I have no notion that the Palestinians are telling the truth about how many people are killed. I'm sure innocents have been killed, and it's the price of waging a war. I think we should be incredibly careful. I think not we, the Israelis should be incredibly careful to be sure that they're focusing on going after the folks that are propagating this war against Israel. And it's against their interest when that doesn't happen. But I have no confidence in the number that the Palestinians are using.
Whether he has confidence in the actual number Palestinians used it doesn't matter. The actual number doesn't matter, whether it's 6,000 or only 5,000 or something like that. I mean, we have seen image after image after image of entire city blocks being leveled, dropped to the ground. We've seen the hospitals being overrun. We see children being, brought out on stretchers, being cradled in their father's hand. There is a large number of innocent Palestinian people that are being killed because of these airstrikes so far. And look, let's just forget the fiction that these are targeted strikes and they're surgical strikes. There's nothing remotely close to being true. It's obvious that they're just targeting anything that they suspect might be Hamas. There was a map published this afternoon. I think it was in the which one was it? I don't remember if it was the Financial Times. It might have been the FT out of Britain that showed a map of the two areas of Gaza City that are being the most targeted. And there is a massive swath, a whole swath of the city that has just been leveled. That's not targeted. That's not based on intelligence. I don't know what it's based off of, but they're causing tremendous number of civilian casualties. It is in America's vital national interest to get this fixed, to get this under control, because if we give blanket support to Israel and we don't do anything to stop this kind of wanton attacks on civilians, then by definition, or by default, we become guilty of it as well. That harms our reputation. That harms our interest. Now, when we want to say and point a finger at Moscow and say, you're attacking innocent civilians in Ukraine. Now, what moral foundation do you think we have to say that when we obviously are doing turning a blind eye when someone on our side, someone that we care about, is doing the same thing on a much larger scale? You see that we get laughed at. If the United States wants to stand for the right thing, and I do, and I want our country to stand for what's right, we need to be consistent in how we apply it. Even more practically speaking, if you want to have the ability to shame a Russia, for example, or to shame a Syria, for example, into not harming their own people, we have to have the moral power and the moral authority to do so. This undercuts that moral authority. People will just laugh at us and they won't even listen to us when such an egregious difference between what we say and what's happening is put on vivid display on your screens. Now, this is for America. This is not defense of anything about Hamas does. They are 100% guilty of what they did and fully deserve to be punished unreservedly for what they did. However, into going after that just objective, we cannot just stand idly by while Israel kills tens of hundreds or potentially in the thousands of innocent people who did nothing, who just want to live. That should be our objective. We should say, hey, we're not just going to give blanket support for this. You've got to do a better job. And we'll have to wait and see how that works out here. But the president owes us an explanation. He owes us an answer. Those questions were valid. They were legitimate. One is he's got to protect our soldiers and our troops. The other one, he's got to protect our reputation. Both of those things are vital if American national interests are going to be successfully accomplished, both in this war with Israel and Hamas, the one with Ukraine and Russia, or anything else we may have anywhere in the world. Our word has to matter something, or we don't have any influence, and we can't influence things in a direction that we want, in a direction for good. There is real consequences to these kinds of actions and unwillingness to address hard questions. And I hope that the reporters won't let the president get by without answering those questions. And more importantly, I hope that the president himself will, well, okay, I wish he would change his view. He's probably not going to, but it's important that for a deep dive audience that you know what's really going on. So don't be put off by these non-answers or distracted by other things he's saying. You need to know the truth, and we're going to keep bringing it to you. Thanks, and we'll see you next time on Deep Dive.